I want to start first. Can you see the PowerPoint? Any thumbs up to just let me know? Okay, I see some heads nodding. The interesting part about Zoom is I can't see what you see, so I'm always a little bit worried, but clearly that you can see that. So I want to start out as we think about the work of the trustees from the perspective of how does that work fit into the ministry of the local church and the ministry that God is calling us to. And as our base scripture, I love this verse from Luke's gospel. From everyone to whom much has been given, much will be required. And from the one to whom much has been entrusted, even more will be demanded. And as I think about that, and as I think about all the buildings and the property and the assets and the wonderful facilities that God has given to us as local churches that come together as an annual conference, I'm just reminded that God does want us to use those to God's glory. And so tonight I want us to think about ways that we can do that and ways that we can be the best stewards possible. So as we think about that, I want to kind of just lay the foundation. And for me, the foundation always is, what's the mission of the church? And the mission of the church is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of both local communities. And as we transform local communities, then working all together will ultimately transform the world. So that's our call. That's why we gather together as local churches. That's why we build buildings. That's why we buy property. That's why we have classes and grow in our relationship with Jesus Christ so that we can, and then turn, go and make disciples of others. So as we think about the ministry of the Board of Trustees, the ministry of the Board of the Trustees is to help the local church fulfill its mission, to help the community in the world by supervising and by maintaining all properties belonging to the congregation so that, and this is the most important, you're supervising, you're maintaining, you're watching over so that the ministries of the congregation may be effective. That's your purpose. You're doing all this work, and the trustees are the kind of behind the scenes foundational folks who make sure that everything's ready so that the ministries of the congregation may be effective. And as we think about that, I think what's important is that we remember that we're part of an ongoing ministry and an ongoing journey. What you're doing is you're ensuring that the congregation is a good steward of what previous generations have made available to us so that it's available for future generations. So we have wonderful, faithful previous generations that provided many of the things that we use now. And our job as local church trustees is then to take care of that so that they're also available for future generations. The Board of Trustees shouldn't interfere with the ministry program of the church, even if that means the building is going to be used and in a sense it might wear out. I think that's what God wants us to happen in all of our buildings, is they just get worn out because they're used so much in order to continue the ministries of the church that we got to fix them up and keep going. But trustees shouldn't interfere. They're there to help support and help to guide and yes, to put some boundaries around some things, but not to stand in the way of ministries happening. And so ultimately, the ministry of the Board of Trustees is to provide a safe, clean, well-maintained environment so that people can come together and can work together to serve Christ and to make disciples of Jesus Christ. So, again, we're providing kind of the container in which ministries can happen. So as we think about that, that's the purpose of the trustees. Well, what's the purpose of the church building? And I believe that the purpose of the church building is that God's given that to us as a tool that enables the local church to fulfill its mission and vision to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. You see how this all fits together? Your work as local church trustees helps to fulfill the vision. Even the very building or buildings or property that you have as a local church, all are meant to be a tool through which the church can live out its mission and its vision to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. So how are you supposed to be organized? And trustees are a little bit unique in how they're organized according to the discipline. So let's go over those kind of specific requirements so that you know and can make sure you're in compliance with the discipline and how is best we found over the years to set things up. So the Board of Trustees, if you want to look in a book of discipline, a lot of your work is found in paragraphs 2525 to 2526. And what that says is that the Board of Trustees should be composed of no more than 9 and no more than 3 persons. So anywhere between 3 and 9 is a good number of folks to be in the trustees. And a lot of that is determined by the size of your local church, but between 3 and 9 members. You also are asked to have a third lay women and a third lay men. Now, those of you math majors know that leaves another third, and so that can be anybody, men or women, but it needs to be at least 1/3 lay women, 1/3 lay men. Interestingly, for the trustees, the Book of Discipline requires that 2/3 of the members must be professing members of the local church. Your church may have some other requirements that says every member should be a member of the local church, every member of a committee, but for the Board of Trustees, at least 2/3 of them have to be professing members of the local church. Maybe there's some other folks who come regularly and they have some good expertise and your church would want to put them on the Board of Trustees, but this is the guideline again, that 2/3 are professing members. Can be more if you want them to be. And it's nice to have your Board of Trustees in multiples of 3 because you're asked to divide those into 3 classes with 1/3 elected each year. And that provides a wonderful rotation of folks who are new and bringing new ideas and new energy to the Board of Trustees, and then 2 other groups who have some history and some seasoning and have been with the group for a little bit longer. And so it provides a wonderful continuance as you move through the 1/3 being elected every year. So that's a good way to help people rotate and also to help folks in your local church have an opportunity to serve on the Board of Trustees. I think it's important for folks to get that opportunity, not only to see the kind of facilities and assets that you have, but also to take their turn in helping to be good stewards of them. Now, the members of the trustees are nominated by the Nomination and Leadership Development Committee, and they're elected by the Charge Conference. And it's very important in our polity, in the way we organize the United Methodist Church, that the Charge Conference elects the trustees because you're the legal entity, you're the legal group also of the local church, which means you're the folks that sign the contracts and you sign the deeds and other things. And so you need to have an official election by the Charge Conference in order to serve in that way. And so if perhaps somebody has to rotate off, maybe they move away, or maybe they get to a point where they just can't fulfill their term of service, then the Nominations and Leadership Development Committee would nominate another person, but that person also has to be approved by the Charge Conference. And so your church would want to have a special called Charge Conference in order to elect that person, so that again, they're a part of the official body that's the legal entity of your local church. Trustees also must be of legal age as determined by law, and that around here is 21. The pastor, this is always a question, is a pastor a member of the Board of Trustees? And certainly they're a member of the Board of Trustees, but they don't have a vote unless in some kind of unique situation, your local church has voted the pastor to be a member of the Board of Trustees. And that doesn't happen very often. And it's not really the best practice for it to happen, because certainly the pastor is going to move on and the pastor has other responsibilities. And so it's really the responsibility of the laity in the local church to serve in this way. But the pastor is a member with voice, but not with vote. Your church treasurer can also come and serve on the Board of Trustees, but again, he or she would have a voice but no vote. They wouldn't be, a voting member, but they can come and serve and provide input and provide information as is needed. Now, also different from many of the other committees and teams in the local church, the Board of Trustees elect their own chairperson, their own vice chairperson, and their own secretary. And so what you need to do, it's January, and if your local church Board of Trustees hasn't gathered together, it's a good time to get them together and to have that annual election. It may be you're assuming that somebody's going to continue as the chair and the vice chair and the secretary, but you've got to do it officially every year, is to meet together and in January and to vote on who will be the chair, who will be the vice chair, and who will be the secretary. And those get listed on your church leadership roles. They also get shared on your church conference report that you'll turn in towards the end of the year. And the last is that the Board of Trustees should meet at least quarterly. You may decide that you need to meet more often than that, but about once every 3 months is a good time to come together, to check in, to be able to fulfill your responsibilities as a board. And so, that's 4 times a year. Now, I know that when I served a local church, we would meet 4 times a year, and those meetings would be about 3 hours long, because we had so much business to do. And so it may be easier for you to meet every other month and make it a little bit shorter of a meeting. But again, that's up to your local church Board of Trustees, but at least have 4 meetings a year. So let me pause for a second and see if you all have any questions about the organization and about the purpose of the Board of Trustees. And if you have a question, you can unmute yourself and ask it, or you can put it in the chat and Shantae's going to read it to me and we'll answer it. Arnetta, it says that you can't see the PowerPoint. Are you on an iPad? If you're on an iPad, you might flip through the screens and then you'll be able to see it. Can everybody else see it?
I have it now, Amy. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Let me ask you this though. With COVID-19, that's now 3 years old, that has put a crimp in some of the functions of the church committees, trustees being one of them. Any suggestions?
Well, I think, if you can meet by Zoom, I think that that's a good way to do it. And then as you're meeting, to design how you can be if you need to be in the church building, how you can do that safely with masks or just a couple of people at a time, that type of thing. But, I think right now, the more virtual meetings we can do, the better. And if you can't do Zoom or something like that, you could, do a conference call. And that also would help you just kind of think through the things that need to happen. And then maybe the chair and the vice chair could do the walkthrough of the building if they needed to, or something like that. But yeah, we're all pivoting and adapting to COVID that hopefully someday will become an endemic, and we'll be able to at least be together, I hope. All right, well, don't see any questions. So let me move on to the organization of the Board of the, I'm going to move on to the responsibilities of the Board of Trustees. And in the discipline, you'll find the responsibilities of the Board of the Trustees in paragraph 2533. As you see that number, we're kind of in the back of the book of discipline, but this is what is said that the trustees are supposed to do. One, and we've already talked about it a lot, is to oversee, maintain, and supervise all local church property. This includes conducting an annual inspection and inventory of all church property, including the parsonage. Now, I know that there are some churches that have a parsonage committee, and that's wonderful because they take great care of the parsonage, but the trustees have the ultimate responsibility for the parsonage if you have one. So your parsonage committee should kind of be a subcommittee of your trustees, and be sure there's a link. A couple of the trustees serve on the parsonage committee, or so that there is a link between that parsonage committee and the trustees. And again, that yearly walkthrough is just wonderful so that you can see what needs to happen, so that you can make some priority lists. I think there's nothing more frustrating than to come to the end of 5 years and you haven't been in the parsonage and it's time for the pastor to move, or maybe it's 10 years and all this work needs to be done. If you've done a yearly walkthrough of the parsonage, a yearly walkthrough of the church, an inventory of what you've got, and then you'll kind of know what's needed and know how to plan your year ahead. Again, that just helps us to be better stewards of what we've got. And then you're called to report annually to the charge conference on the state of the church's property, equipment, investments, and resources. And we typically do that on a trustees form. Many of you will become familiar with that. You can do it online now and see what the person filled in last year, so that it makes it easier. But that's what you're called to do. You're called to report on what things look like. And the purpose of that, mainly for the church building, I think, is to prevent what you'll see in this next picture. And in this next picture are some pictures that we've taken of churches with an extreme amount of deferred maintenance. And when it gets this bad, it's a lot of money to fix it up, if it can be. And so, our goal, your goal as local church trustees is to prevent this from happening, but to be able to address things in kind of a regular manner. And in the same way we do our houses, that we do preventative maintenance, we want to do the same thing on the church building. Another responsibility of the trustees is to receive and administer all gifts that are made to the congregations, and to make sure the trust funds of the congregation are invested properly, and develop guidelines for receiving and managing wills and trusts and bequests and other investments that are given to the church. That's why sometimes the church treasurer will sit in on trustee meetings, because they might have the information about the investments, but you all are also the investment arm, again, because you're the legal arm of the local church. So if a person gives a piece of property to the local church, it's the Board of Trustees who receives that piece of church property and decides what to do with it. They may decide to sell it and then put the proceeds in an endowment, or put the proceeds in a building fund or something like that, but they receive it. Or perhaps somebody in their will leaves a specific amount of money to the church in order to provide a legacy moving forward. And it's the Board of Trustees again that would receive that gift and then would work with the trustees first, and then the church council, and how you might best use that money so that it could provide a legacy for the church. Marilyn asked a question about, would the endowment team be a subset of the trustees? And yes, they would be. And it's again good to have a link. Maybe just one trustee that's also on the endowment team, and you'd want somebody from finance on the endowment team. But again, that would be a good subset to work together with that. This next thing that the local church trustee do is that they ensure that the articles of incorporation and that the minutes of the corporation of the congregation are kept up to date if applicable. So one thing, if you're new to this role, that you want to find out is your church incorporated? And if it is incorporated, what that does is it adds a little bit more of a layer of responsibility that you have, because being incorporated, that means that there are articles of incorporation, and you have to follow those. Most of them say that the corporation will meet once a year, and that's typically the charge conference. And then also you have to, you'll have a book, should have a book, that are the minutes of the corporation, and that needs to be kept up every year as well. Probably about 20 years ago, there was a big push for local churches to become incorporated in order to protect the members of the church from any liabilities that the church might face. And so lots of churches became incorporated, but friends, if we're not following the rules, if we're not following the rules of the corporation, then it's no good. A lawyer will come in and say, well, yeah, you say you're incorporated, but you're certainly not doing what corporations do. And so, so it's really important that you do that. Not hard, but super important that you keep the minutes of the corporation and up to date, and do that if you are an incorporated body. As I'm saying that, I want to share with you a place where you can find lots of great resources. And the resources are found on our conference website. If you go up here above the logo, you'll see a button that's titled Administration. And if you click on that, down the left-hand side, you'll see a category called Forms, Documents, and Publications. And in this category of resources are lots and lots of things that you might find helpful. Like one is a local incorporation guidebook that will help you incorporate your church if you want to do that. There are other also guides that I will share with later, but this is where you'll find all those things. And so when you get a chance, I invite you to just go under administration and then forms, documents, and publications, and see what's there, because I think it might be helpful. It's where we try to keep things updated so that folks can find them very easily. Oops, I'm gonna back up just a second. Okay, so the next responsibility is to be responsible in conjunction with a pastor for the use of the church buildings and grounds. So it's your responsibility to just work with the pastor in how the church building and the church grounds are used. And again, as we talked about earlier, you don't want to be the impediment to church ministries, but you want to figure out ways that they can best be used by the most amount of people. You also are the group that if an outside group asked to come and use the local church's facilities, it's the Board of Trustees that needs to approve that. And one of the things that I would highly recommend, and again, you'll find it under that forms and documents, is what we call a facilities use agreement. So say perhaps the Girl Scouts are going to come and meet at your local church. I would invite you to work with the troop leader to fill out this facilities use agreement, so that you're clear about what the church is responsible for, and you're clear what the Girl Scouts are responsible for. And it really helps in communication. It may be that there's an AA group that meets at your local church, a wonderful ministry, or an NA group. Again, a facilities use agreement is a wonderful way to just make it clear that here's what the church is going to provide, here's what the group is going to provide, and what the group agrees to do. With some groups, one of the things you may ask them is to add you to their liability insurance. Certainly the local church carries liability insurance, but if the other group carries liability insurance as well, like the Girl Scouts, you might say, we would like you to add our local church as an additional insured to your policy. That just provides another layer of protection for your local church. If any of you have received multiple communications from me or been reading about it in the newspapers, we've been dealing with that with the Boy Scouts and the charter agreements that many of the local churches have signed as they've welcomed Boy Scouts and supported that great ministry. But one of the things that isn't clear in the charter agreement is how much responsibility the Boy Scouts should take for the liability of that troop and how much the local church has. And so we're working to clarify that responsibility so that there's less liability for the local church. But the facilities use agreement is a great way to just make sure everybody knows what to expect. Everybody knows what they're agreeing to do. And then if there are any problems, you have a piece of paper that you can take out and say, okay, now you agreed to this and we're having some problems here. Can we work on this? And so it's a great way that, again, to make having outside groups use your church facility, to have that be a good relationship, a relationship where we're expressing the love of Christ, but also where we're both being good stewards of what God has given to us. And so as we're thinking about liability and stuff, it's also the local church trustees' responsibility to maintain adequate insurance on all church property and to develop appropriate risk management policies. Now, the denomination, and many of you have seen this before, but the denomination does provide minimum insurance requirements for the local church. Again, this is on this is on the forms and documents page, and I will also post this with the recording of tonight's seminar so that you can easily access this. But as you're working with an insurance agency, your insurance agency, have this in hand and let them know what the United Methodist Church recommends. And notice on this that for the sexual misconduct liability, which is important to have, they also offer some options depending on the size of the church. They just started doing this, knowing that we have some very small churches who may not need as much coverage as larger churches, but this gives a good overview of what you need to have and how to compare that with your insurance policies. And again, it's good to meet with the insurance agent every year. They're working for you. You're paying for that insurance. So meet with them, make sure that things are up to date, and also see what other resources they have. Our insurance agencies are wonderful about having risk management information and videos and things that can help us to prevent the liabilities that we might have. But the other risk management things that we do as a local church are safe sanctuary policies, which is how we protect our children, our youth, and vulnerable adults. And every local church should have these and should be following these. So again, that's a part of the board of trustees. You need to make sure they're being followed. You may not be the group that devised them, but you need to make sure that they're being followed so that, again, that mitigates some of the risks in being in church. The next responsibility of the Board of Trustees is to submit to the Committee on Finance the annual budget requests for insurance, for property maintenance and improvement, and for new property purchases. So when it comes to budgeting time in the year, the Board of Trustees says to the church, well, it's going to cost us this much for insurance and this much for utilities, and we need this much to maintain the building. And you present that to the Finance Committee so that they can incorporate that into the budget to be presented to the Church Council and then ultimately to the Charge Conference. Let me also recommend that if you don't have one, that you set up what is sometimes referred to as a capital fund, or as I've also heard it called, a long-term maintenance fund. And that's a fund where you set aside some money, either from the church budget or through special offerings, some money, so that you begin to amass a pot of money for capital expenditures. That way, when you need to replace the roof, you don't have to do a special offering and raise $15,000 to replace the roof. But if you've been putting money into it every year for capital expenses, then you'll at least have some to start with the capital expenditure. And you might need to have a special offering for more, a little bit more, but it isn't such a monumental task. It's like we all have savings accounts, or most of us have savings accounts, and so we try to keep enough in our savings accounts to cover those things when the car breaks down, or when there's a flood or in our house or that type of thing. And I think the same is true of the church, that being responsible stewards is to have a place where you're saving for the capital expenditures that are going to come up. I mean, computers wear out, chairs wear out, TVs wear out, roofs wear out, and you've got to be able to replace them. So I think that it's important to be able to have that and move forward. Marilyn asked a question about how much the percentage that should be in this capital account, and I would look at it depends on the size of your facilities. But I would, want within 5 years there to be enough to be about 20% of what you expect your capital costs to be, and so you can begin to take a look at that. The last church I served had an incredible local church board of trustees chair, and what he did was he and the rest of the trustees went around and listed every piece of equipment that the church had and how long they thought it would last, and then what would be the replacement cost. And then we funded that every month from the church budget. And so when we had, when something needed to be replaced, there was definitely the money there to replace it. So, take a look around, 10% would be great every year. That way you'll begin to build that up. And then if you get enough that you don't need it for a while, then you can stop until you have a major capital expense, and then again, begin to add to it again.
Amy?
Yes.
Rebecca Wright has a question about parsonages.
Okay. Rebecca? It's not too late to ask about the parsonage. We can go back around. Can you type it in the chat? Okay, we'll let you ask later. No problem. Okay, and so finally, the responsibility, well, not almost finally, is that you are responsible to the charge conference and to the church council, which means that yes, you can make some decisions, but if there may be decisions that you all make as a board of trustees that you need to take to the church council or take to the charge conference in order to be approved. So the board of trustees needs to do what the church council and the charge conference asked of it, because those are the official governing bodies of our local church. So you're responsible to the things that they ask of you to do. You also, again, as the legal entity, get to execute all contracts, including those for cleaning and lawn care services. Sometimes we hire a custodian and pay them as an employee, or we hire someone to mow the lawn and keep the facilities up. Lots of times we do that as volunteers. But if you contract with a cleaning person or with a lawn care service, then it's the board of trustees that need to sign that contract. They would be the ones that watch over that. And if you have a contract, one of the suggestions that I would make is that you say to the SBRC, will you give us the authority to oversee how these things are being done? If we're going to sign the contract, would you be willing to give us the responsibility to make sure that the contract is being fulfilled by the person or by the people that are fulfilling it? Just have to do that once, and as long as the SBRC gives you that permission, then you can go ahead and not only sign the contract, but you can also oversee those contracts. And I think that's the best division of responsibilities, that the staff parish committee is responsible for employees, but that the trustees are responsible for contracted workers because you actually have that contract, and you want to help them to fulfill that contract to the best of their ability. And then lastly, your responsibility as the Board of Trustees is to maintain and store records. Now, I've gotten to serve a lot of churches, and churches are great at holding on to records and things until they decide that it's going to be the spring cleanup day. And so you have this great group of people, and they come into the church and they clean it all out, and it looks beautiful, only they've thrown out some things that are kind of important. So one of the other documents that I'll put with this webinar, as well as is on the forms and document page, is a records retention schedule about the records and that you need to keep and for how long you need to keep them. And as the Board of Trustees, it's your responsibility for having that place where they can be kept. A fireplace filing cabinet works really well. And then making sure that the groups that are responsible for these records, keep them for as long as they need to be kept. Again, I've been spending lots of time dealing with the Boy Scouts this fall and now into January. And one of the things that churches that have had some legal cases filed against them have had to go looking for insurance policies way back to the 1960s. And sometimes those are really hard to find. We're not sure who was in charge then, and we're not sure where they are. And so it's really important that we always keep the insurance policies. And if we have a specific place to keep them, that will really help the church in the long run. So that's one of the things that the local church trustees can take responsibility for. So let me pause, and lots of responsibilities. What questions do you have? And it's good. It's fine to unmute yourself if you want to. Can we scan and archive digitally? Absolutely. Absolutely. Just have a backup copy of the archive and know where that is.
Rebecca, we see you're trying to ask your question, but we can't hear you.
Does the charge, I'm going to ask, charge conference or church council set spending limits? So let me see if I'm answering this question correctly, and if I'm not, ask it in a different way. Typically, most church councils will say to the trustees, if you've requested a budget, we'll say to the trustees, we'll let you spend up to $1,000 to do repairs, to do maintenance. Might be we'll let you spend $500. And then anything over that, we would like for you to get bids and bring them to the church council in order for us to make the best decision and be the best stewards. So the church council can set some spending limits on how much you can spend just as a group on your own. And certainly having that permission makes things move much faster. If you have to get church council permission for every little thing you do, that's going to take forever. But lots of church councils will say you can spend up to this amount, and that'll be fine. And if it's over this amount, depending on what it is, we would like you to get bids and then bring it to church council so we can make the best decision. So hopefully I answered that question.
I'm sorry, that was the reason I asked the question, was because I'm new to being head of the trustees 3 weeks ago.
All right.
And I've yet to see a budget or anything that tells me exactly what I can do and not do. And then we had the snow last week, and we're up against the wall trying to get the sidewalks and the driveways cleared. And so I just took it on myself. I said, it's got to be done. And found somebody that would do it. That was just had to be. And without having time to say, call this, call that, or whoever to get the clearance to do that. And I'm up against another dilemma right now with a similar situation. It's going to take a little longer. That, nobody said, yes, you can spend $500 or $1.50 without, and I need to find that out. I need to make it very clear what I can spend and what I can't spend.
Right, and so your treasurer, your church council chair, pastor should know those answers and hopefully be able to tell you, but agreed. And you know, sometimes the ox is in the ditch, and so you do have to make a decision and you know, do the best you can, and hopefully we're parts of communities of grace that understand that and you know, help you as you move forward. So here's this, came in a little late and you may have covered this, but I'm a first-time trustees and wanted to know if we're allowed to share this Zoom with others and reference it later. Absolutely. That's why we're recording these. Is our hope would be that if you wanted to share it not to your whole board of trustees, or if you want to just, you know, tell people where it is so that they can watch it, we want you to be able to do it, or to, you know, look back and see something that was said or find a resource that was mentioned. Definitely. That's our hope, is to have a good group of resources and videos that local churches can use for training, because people are new. And so it's a good way to learn about what's going on. Shante, any other questions that you've seen? Okay.
We're still just trying to figure out Rebecca's question, but she's
Rebecca's sign language?
I can tell she looks a little frustrated, but we're trying.
Okay, we'll keep working on it. I promise. All right, so let's talk a little bit about property. And the trustees hold the title to all local church property on behalf of the United Methodist Church. Again, you're the legal entity. So the Book of Discipline says that that at least 2 local church trustees need to sign the deed and can sign the deed. And most all property is, you know, put in the name of the board of trustees of a local church or the name of the local church. But the trustees, that's their responsibility to hold that in trust for the United Methodist Church. And we're Methodists, which means we have a method for everything. So if you are going to purchase, or if you're going to take a loan out on property, or if you're going to sell property, it does need the approval not only of the local church board of trustees, but of the pastor and of the district superintendent and the district committee on church location and building and the charge conference. There's a layer of approvals that you have to get, and each of these groups can add some wisdom to the decision. It's not just another hump to jump over, or hoop to jump through. I'll get the metaphor right, the hoop to jump through. But really, these folks can have some wisdom and have some experience and can help you. I know about a church that was selling a piece of property, and so they decided to sell it. They got their district superintendent's permission. They got their local pastor's permission. They were getting ready to go to their charge conference, but they went to their district committee on church location and building. Every district has one. And the district committee on location and building said, you need to get another appraisal on this property. It is too low. It's too low. It's not, it's for the market today, it's too low. And so the local church did, and they were able to increase what they sold the property for. So again, that group of people who have some different expertise, who come from different parts of the district, come together and they have your best interest at heart in order so that the church can make the best decisions. So again, those layers of authority are important and are meant to be helpful as you move through that. And especially for property questions, when in doubt, please check the discipline, because we have a method that you go through, and your pastor and your district superintendent can walk you through that. If you have other questions, I'm glad to help you walk you through that as well, as far as what needs to be done, so that again, you don't make any mistakes in the process. I also wanted to mention, I didn't know that I would still have to be talking about COVID, but we are, as Arnetta reminded us. And so just a reminder to the trustees that in the absence of another committee, the trustees are responsible for implementing policies and procedures that protect those who gather in the buildings and on the grounds. Now, I know that there are some churches that established a health committee or a coming back into the building committee or a safety committee, and that committee has taken that responsibility. But if your church didn't do that, this shouldn't be just on the shoulders of your local pastor, but the trustees should work with the local pastor in establishing those policies and procedures that will protect the congregation or anybody else who's coming into the building. And right now, that's a really important responsibility. And I thank you for taking that seriously as we continue to navigate through this time. One of the other things that we have learned through the pandemic, and it is going to happen coming out of the pandemic, is that we're going to be what I would call a both and. We're going to need to be both and communities. And what that means is that we're going to have worship in person in our local churches. And I know most local churches are doing that now, and they're taking particular precautions. But the other thing is there are some people outside of the church or that are members of the church that still don't feel safe coming back into the church, particularly because they might be immunocompromised or they might just feel at risk. And so as we did at the beginning of the pandemic, we need to provide for them online resources so that they can participate. Also, as you did online worship during the worst of the pandemic, there may have been people from outside of your community and even outside of your state that joined your local church, and you want to continue to provide for them. And so being a both and community means that not only are you providing the best you can for all those who can gather in person, but you're also providing those for those who gather online. Excuse me. And so one of the things that the local church trustees can do is to work to provide the equipment necessary to have quality online worship, if at all possible. Excuse me. And simultaneously with this webinar, there is another webinar going on about both and worship. And again, that's being recorded. You can look at it later. But our conference has made available some grants and some help to help local churches decide what they need, as well as some expertise in how to do it. And so I hope you'll take advantage of that, because I think coming out of the pandemic, online worship isn't going to go away. We're going to need to do both and it's the local church trustees that can begin that process by making sure that the church has the equipment that it needs so that it can do that with quality. Take another thing. I'm talking too loud. So the next slides I want to share are a couple of different organizations that can help local church trustees maximize the use of their buildings. One of the things that we realized going into the future is that we may not be able to rely solely on the church offering plate to maintain our buildings, that maybe there needs to be other sources of income or streams of income that help the local church as it maintains its buildings, but also as it continues to be in ministry with its community. Wesley Community Development is a organization that is affiliated with the Western North Carolina Conference and provides wonderful resources to help churches maximize the use of their church property for ministry. They're located right next door to our conference office and are glad to consult with local churches about ways that their buildings can be used. So let me give you some of the examples. One of the things that Wesley Community Development did was they took our entire conference and scanned through all sorts of property records and determined that we have 14,691,797 total square footage of buildings as an annual conference. That's a lot of building. We have 2,417 buildings, and we occupy 7,650 acres as an annual conference. A lot of property, a lot of buildings, a lot of square footage that God has given to us to use for ministry. So some of the things that Wesley Community Development will do is, this is an example, there are a group of 8 churches in the Belmont area. This is Belmont, North Carolina, in between Charlotte and Gastonia. And what they realized that taking Park Street United Methodist as kind of the center, there were 2 United Methodist churches that were 5 minutes away. There were 4 United Methodist churches that were 10 minutes away from Park Street. That's a lot of United Methodist churches in the area. And so you wonder, well, where are the members coming from these local United Methodist churches? Well, each of the churches was given a color, and there's what it looks like. Members of those churches come from all over, and they probably pass 1 or more churches to get to the church of which they're a member. So the question becomes, I wonder how these churches can work together to be in ministry. I wonder what kind of assets each one of them has that would make a big, greater difference in the community. And so, and as members are coming together and they're coming from various places, you know, what are the ways that we can maximize the presence of United Methodists in the area and the impact of United Methodists in this area? And so Wesley has got that data for every local church in our annual conference, and we'd be glad to share it with you as you think about the best ways that you can be in ministry. One of the other things that they discovered is that sometimes our building designs are often in the way of new forms of worship. That, you know, we designed them for a particular form of worship 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and sometimes they need to be redone so that can embrace new forms of worship. And I'm not just talking about contemporary worship. I'm talking about screens and cameras and maybe some opportunities to have prayer stations around the sanctuary. So again, beginning to dream and think about ways that you can make worship more exciting. Sometimes it means a change in your church building. They also remind us that our campuses must be more than silos. It's not just a place where the church members come and they come to worship and they come to Bible study and they come to Sunday school and they come to fellowship meals, but our churches need to be a vital and vibrant part of the community, a place where the community gathers, and then a place from where church members are sent out into the community. The striking statistic that they shared with us is that our current usage of our buildings is only about 12%. So we use about 12% of our buildings all the time. The rest of the time they sit empty. And what could we be doing with those buildings to the glory of God? And they believe that in the next 5 years, there will be some significant change to how we use our campuses. And so they're excited about it. They're excited about what's available. Right now, they're working with the former Cole Memorial property, which is out in Derrida in the Charlotte area. And this church closed. It just dwindled down and didn't have enough members, but it's on a major part, a major intersection, and hopefully will be a part of the Blue Line for the Charlotte mass transit system in the years to come. So the thought was, how can we use that property to glorify God for right now and see what God would have us do with it? So Wesley Community Development is working on some affordable housing for the elderly that will have a place to come and be and have a beautiful place to live and find community. And then, you know, the church can look at ways that we can provide a worshiping community in the center of that, or the ways local churches around this area can come and provide resources to this. So it addresses a need that we have, a vital need for affordable housing, but it also addresses a way that we can invite people into community and use our church property in that way, and then see what God would have us do in the next several years. But it's an exciting way to think about it. Another thing that they've been working on is the merger of two local churches. And they're also here in Charlotte, although they've helped with the merger of some others. But these two local churches kind of were about half a mile from each other, maybe a little bit more, but on the same road. Kind of a big shopping center separated them. And they began to think, as both congregations got a little bit smaller, what really is God's vision for us? Can we be better together than apart? How can our assets best serve what's emerging for our two churches? And what will help us follow that vision? So this upper church is Muzon United Methodist Church. And then the bottom church, or it was then renamed Selwyn United Methodist Church. And the bottom one is Grace United Methodist Church. And what they did is they began to dream together is they sold the Selwyn property to a developer where it's going to be used for condos in an area of Charlotte that's rapidly growing, and that would be the best use of that property. And then they're going to take the proceeds from the sale of that property, and they're going to invest it into the Grace property. But now, as they've merged, they've become Woodlawn Community Church. So they're investing it in the Woodlawn Community Church property, so that they can build a new worship space, so that they also can have some condominiums around the outside that would lease that space, that again would provide income to the church so that they can continue their ministries. So Wesley Community Development helps dream about those kind of things and the ways that we can make the maximum use of our property. Another group that's doing this is a group called Boundless Impact that is developing all across the conference what we call Imagine Hubs. And Imagine Hubs are ways that we equip faith communities to use their space, to use their resources as a means for improving the economic empowerment in your community. And so a local church will be trained to become an Imagine Hub, and will decide on a ministry that will help their community, and then we'll work with community partners in providing that ministry. A couple things that local churches have done already is to use their church kitchen as a way to provide meals for others in the community, or to use it and to lease it to caterers so that they can take it and do what they need to do for catering. And then as they lease it to the caterer, the church receives some income, and they can use that again in community ministries. Others have done homework hubs where the children are invited to come, particularly middle schoolers are invited to come, and the church has computers. They have church members and other community members that come and serve as volunteers and as tutors, and the children come there and they have a meal, and they have the opportunity to do their homework and to have the resources that they need. And again, it's bettering their community in innovative ways. And so Imagine Hubs are a way to build bridges between congregations and underconnected neighbors to foster an environment of innovation. There's a church in Greensboro that hosts every Thursday an opportunity for different kind of small micro vendors to come together and to either share their produce or to share the things that they're making. And so they invite them to come and use their church property in that way. And so people come to that and then have some time for fellowship and enjoyment. So again, Imagine Hub is another way that you can maximize the use of your church property. And down at the bottom of this slide is how you get in touch with Imagine Hub and with Cindy Thompson, and she'd be glad to talk to you about how your church could have a team that's trained and some resources to do this. So finally, as you begin a new year, and as many of you are new to the local church board of trustees, I've got a series of questions that you might want to ask as you begin to fulfill your time of service. The first one is, where are the deeds to the property? Are the deeds in a safety deposit box? Are the deeds in someone's house? Are the deeds in the fireproof filing cabinet? Where are they located? And if we don't have them, do we need to go down to the Register of Deeds and get copies of them so that we have a copy of them as well? The next thing is that to ask is, do property titles need to be updated because of a merger or an incorporation? One of the things that we find here in the conference office as we search property records is we local churches don't do a real good job of keeping our records updated in this way. So if your church is incorporated, is all your property titled in the name of the incorporation? And if it's not, that needs to get done. Or has your church merged, or has your church name changed? And do you need to update the deeds so that it's in the proper name, so that, you know, so that when they do those title searches, they can easily find it. But, you know, remember, a lot of the deeds for our church property date back to, some of them back to the 1800s. And so, you know, it's really important to make sure that they're updated in the current church name. Again, if your church is incorporated, where are the articles of incorporation? Where is the minutes book? And if you can't find one, never bad time to start one. It's good time to just get that started and know from the time that you've accepted this responsibility that you're going to make sure that those things are fulfilled. Another fun one is, when was the last time the fire extinguishers were serviced? Now, some people have services that come in and do that, but in lots of our local churches, we bought a fire extinguisher and we put it under the kitchen sink down in the fellowship hall, and nobody's looked at it for a long time. So fire extinguisher is only going to be as helpful as it is able to be used. So again, when were they, the last time they were serviced? Your local fire department will be glad to come out and help you as well. Where's the safe sanctuary policy that was adopted by the charge conference? And is it posted? But most importantly, is it being followed? Is it being followed? Are you making sure that there are 2 unrelated adults in every classroom? Are there windows in the doors? Is somebody being a hall monitor and rotating through the halls during the Sunday school hour and during the church service, as far as, you know, with the nursery and maybe the toddler room? But, you know, are those policies are only as good as they're followed. So are they being observed? Are the trainings that you agreed to do being done? Are you having regular CPR training and regular safe sanctuary training? And if not, you know, how can you get that scheduled? And the trustees would bring that to the church council and say, we need to get this done. And let's figure out a way and a plan to do it. Are there building use policies that have been approved by the charge conference? And if so, where are they, so that you can become familiar with them and know what those building use policies are? And then lastly, are the trustees reviewing insurance policies annually? I can't say that enough, that, you know, it's tragic when we have a local church that has a fire and they haven't reviewed their church policies, and there's no way that that insurance policy would cover the rebuilding of the church. And certainly folks are generous and God provides, but it's just good to make sure that you're well protected. Since God has given you this wonderful property and these wonderful facilities, let's be the best stewards and be as responsible as we can for them. So those are just some of the beginning questions that I would begin to ask. Some other fun ones are, if you have a septic system, when was the last time it was checked? And what about a church well? For those of you out in the country, when was the last time the water was checked? Things that, again, provide for the safety of the local church and the local community. The last slide that I'll share with you tonight is resources that are available for you. And again, you'll be able to see this slide deck too, but Discipleship Ministries provides some wonderful resources, particularly about safe sanctuaries. Our General Counsel on Finance Administration is the one that produces the minimum insurance guidelines, but they also have some other forms and other policies. They're very helpful. Our conference website, which I've already showed you about, And then finally, the denomination produces what we call guidelines. They're little booklets. And for trustees, it's guidelines for leading your congregation, the trustees. And we have that here in the Resource Center. If you want to call in our Conference Resource Center and borrow it so that you can read it, or you can purchase it through Cokesbury. You can also purchase it through Amazon. They have an online version, I think a Kindle version, that you can purchase as well. So there are lots of ways to get that little booklet. It's about 20 pages, an easy read, but again, reminds you of some of the things that I've shared with you tonight. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if there are any questions. Let's see.
We do have some questions.
Okay, Shantae, you gonna read them to me?
Yes. The first one is, what percentage of UMC actually own their own parsonages?
I haven't done a count lately, but I would say it's still at around 50%, maybe a little bit more. Some churches have moved to providing a housing allowance for their pastors. Some churches are smaller, and so they don't provide a parsonage for their church. But of churches that have a full-time pastor and need to provide housing, about at least 50% still have a parsonage.
Okay. The next question is, are there funds on the district level or above to help a local church with maintenance items that they cannot afford?
So that would be something to check with your district about. There are, if it's something that is a surprise or is an emergency, oftentimes the districts do have some funds that they can help with to help the local churches. The other thing that we've talked a lot about doing is, if a local church has some maintenance needs, we send building teams to places like Canton and Crusoe after the floods, or when there's hurricane relief. Why can't we work together to have a building or a mission team to help a local church do some maintenance items? And so that's one of the things that I think your church's missional network and your district can help work with you and provide, is if there's manpower needed, if it's something that a group of volunteers or trained people, because we have lots of wonderful trained United Methodists, skilled carpenters and contractors and electricians and plumbers, then perhaps we could work together in that way as well.
The next one is, will we be able to download and print the PowerPoint?
Yes, I will. I'm going to post it as a PDF on the conference website under Winter Leadership. What did we call these? Winter leadership courses, or whatever we call this. And it'll be there under the trustees portion of it. You'll be able to download it, definitely.
Next question. Does the conference have a cadre of tech consultants for the actual wiring, etc.?
Don't know that we have folks here at the conference, but we do have some folks that can tell you what's needed, and then can maybe work with you to find folks in your local area that can do that.
Okay, next question. Also, who has been trained to use the fire extinguishers and defibrillators?
Aha, who has been trained to use the fire extinguisher? Not a question I'll answer. I'll let you all answer that. Definitely. Again, are you training people in how to use that, and what to do with it? And then particularly, we have lots of us have these AEDs. We had a training here in the conference office, but Shantae, that was several years ago. We probably need to have another training.
It looks like Kyle Davis has an answer. It says, for those needing training on defibrillators and other first aid training, I know school nurses have to do a certain number of trainings yearly, so we use them to come train our church, and that helps both.
Wonderful, wonderful. I've also used the first responders sometimes, or EMTs in the area. They've been very helpful too, as well. Other questions that you have? Well, you'll probably think I'm crazy, but I think serving on the local church trustees is one of the best, most exciting responsibilities we have, particularly as God has called you and gifted you for this service. And I know that that you'll be a blessing to your local church as you do that. So know that you have my prayers and also my support. If there's anything we can do to help you or any questions we can answer, we'll do all that we can. If we don't know the answer, we'll point you in the right direction. But I hope that you will take this ministry and that you will use it to provide that incredibly strong foundation so that your church can be that beacon on the hill. So it can be a light to your community and a light to the world. And that that even tonight, as you go to bed, that you'll take a moment to give thanks to God for for the wonderful facilities, for the property, for all the assets that God has given to your local church community. And then commit to using those in the best ways so that your church can spread the good news of Jesus Christ and that others might come to know him and believe in him and find the same joy and peace and love in him that we have. So it's been great to be with you tonight. Again, we'll have this video posted, if not tomorrow, the next day, and the other resources will be there. If you can't get to them and have a question, my email address is on the conference website. I'm glad to help you and just send them to you. No problem at all. But I wish you blessings this evening. I hope you have a great night and give thanks. Give thanks for your service and all the many ways that you give to God and the ways that you help lift up the name of Christ in our world. So blessings and have a great night.